What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be breaking down the 2024 Denver Broncos. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm going to be doing this for all 32 teams. If you haven't noticed, relatively starting out at the bottom are the teams that I have at the bottom of my power rankings. So technically this is the 30th overall team, but as the thumbnail suggests, I think they're going to soar past expectations. Maybe not record-wise, but performance-wise, I do think this is going to be one of the more competitive teams. Spoiler alert, but in this video, we're going to be breaking down the draft class. We're going to be breaking down the offense as well as the defensive depth chart, and then we are also going to go into a record prediction. Super excited for that. Let's get right into this, talking about the draft class. I got Bo Nix. Bo Nix was my QB3. I really like Bo Nix. I'm glad that you got to pair him up with Troy Franklin. I think that is sick. And then Jonah Ellis was a steal there at 76. Granted, he was about that range. I think he was at 100 on my board. And I think that's just because he's more of a designated pass rusher. He was dealing with some injury to his shoulder as the season progressed. So that kind of sucks. Then you got Chris Abrams-Drain, who I thought was a great pickup, especially since Jaleel McLaughlin is going to be up for a contract. Again, we'll talk about that. Audric Estime was a steal. He just ended up testing out relatively poorly, but he's a really, really good backup for Javonte Williams. Devon Bell, I thought that was an absolute shank. And then Nick Carrillo, also thought that was a really bad pick. So, you ended up doing a really good job over your first picks, which matters a lot, which is also why I have a lot of hope for you guys as a franchise going forward. Now, let's talk about the offense here. Extremely underrated. Extremely underrated. Not a huge fan of Luke Wattenberg. And when you have a rookie quarterback, I'm hoping for an experienced center, like one of the two being experienced. That to me gives me a lot of pause. So, I do worry about that, absolutely. As you can see in the bottom right, I do have a color code. I do think Bo Nix will actually be the MVP of this team, of the offense. And that's, because I have a lot of faith in Bo Nix early on having a really solid floor. Javonte Williams is up for a contract. That is interesting. I didn't even remember that. But you also have two of your top offensive linemen up for contracts, and Garrett Bowles has said he's in the mood to win. Might see some issues there in terms of him wanting to play. But not going to speculate that. I just want to bring up that as a note. We're going to go from skill position to line, then line to skill position for the defense. Again, talking about Bo Nix, somebody who I think is a really good game manager with some very high upside, especially with Troy Franklin looming underneath Courtland Sutton, who's pretty much been on the trade market for the past year and a half. Certainly could see him taking a lot more reps. Super excited for that. This is based off of our lad's depth chart, so everything is subject to change. Then, of course, Michael Burton, also up for a contract, but a really solid fullback there. I used to like him back, I believe, when he was on the Bears. But Javonte Williams, top-tier running back. Audric Estime backing him up, so you have a nice little punchy backfield right there. You got Zach Wilson as well. Got to mention him and Tim Patrick at right wide receiver, but Tim's just not been reliably healthy. Looking at the other receivers, Marvin Mims Jr., super underrated. I think he's going to have a Tez Johnson-like effect here, and I love Tez Johnson there at Oregon. So Tez Johnson was utilized quite a bit there by Bo Nix. Excited to see him be essentially Tez Johnson there with Troy Franklin for the foreseeable future. Courtland Sutton, again, pony up SMU. Love it, but probably not somebody that has a guaranteed future. Adam Troutman as well. I wish that were not a comma, but we're going to leave that as is. Adam Troutman, solid tight end. Greg Dulcich behind him as well. It's just nothing that's special. So, is what it is. Garrett Bowles, solid tackle. Again, he's quoted as basically saying, I want to win. So, I can't really imagine him being on the team after this year. Ben Powers. Or, is it Ben? Yeah, no, I was thinking Ben Bredesen. I was like, but Powers, he's not bad as a left guard. Not going to shame it. But Wattenberg is someone who I have zero trust in as a center. Quinn Meinerz, I really, really love. I was praying that he went to the Steelers over Kendrick Green. Still remember, people trying to say I was nuts for not liking Kendrick Green. And, well, we can see where he's at. Then McGlinchey, overpaid right tackle, but better than what they had. So that's a start. So offense, again, C is average. And I think that's really, really good. Again, not C is an average in the NFL, which is, it's an average offense. I think the NFL has gotten to the point where we emphasize offense so much that there's not very many average offenses. Let's go right now into the defense, though. As a Steelers fan, we'll talk about Levi Wallace at the end, but let's just say I have a vendetta against Levi Wallace. But let's get right into it. I actually really like the depth that you have on your team. That's something I really do enjoy, but when you end up looking at this roster as a whole, defensive line wise, I have nothing against Browning, Cooper, Nick Bonito. Like, there's nothing that I have against him. But again, you have to look at this versus the NFL. Do you think they're a top half edge rushing crew? No. There's a much stronger chance that they're the worst edge rushing crew in the NFL. And Washington makes them give them a run for their money, and same thing with Tampa. But I mean, that's why they're all in this bottom cluster here. They're not bad players. It's just comparatively to other NFL rosters, they're just not competing. And then same thing with the defensive interior here. I'm not a huge fan of Zach Allen. John Franklin Myers was fine. It was part of that trade up, I think the Rams did during the draft. Then DJ Jones has been solid too, but he's also up for a contract. So looking out towards the future, not the brightest in the world. But you're looking at those linebackers. Cody Barton, I think he's on a 1-year deal against a stopgap guy when Josie Jewell decided to leave. Drew Sanders getting torn Achilles for the year. That sucks. I love Drew Sanders. I was a big fan of him. Alex Singleton has just been relatively a fill-in guy for a hot minute. Nothing that's bad, but again, you're not getting your socks blown off. Brandon Jones was ass cheeks for the Broncos, but you got him for a relatively good deal. PJ Locke was very, very solid filling in. Of course, you might end up being able to bring back, I'm forgetting Simmons. You might be able to bring him back, but he hasn't even signed yet. Looking at the secondary, though, at the cornerback positions, you got Jaquan McMillan, but you also do have Chris Abrams-Drain there. Certainly a bright future with Chris Abrams-Drain. Of course, Jonah Ellis could end up replacing Jonathan Cooper, so that's a plus as well with Nick Bonito right behind on Baron Browning. But Pat Surtain, obviously the best player of this defense. He's a freak show. And then you got Levi Wallace, who I think should never step on the field as a starter ever again. As a Steelers fan, I was excited to bring him in from Buffalo, and he was absolute ass. I mean, he let up, I think, 7 touchdowns last year, maybe 8, and probably should have let up a lot more if they just targeted him more. So I do think that Jaquan McMillan as well as Levi Wallace are two guys who I don't trust to start every down. I really wouldn't want them to. Luckily for you, though, Jaquan McMillan might be an easy solve with Chris Abrams-Drain. Essentially, you're just an adequate roster. I do think that the NFL's offenses, though, can really exploit a relatively mediocre defense. So let's get right into the records predictions, because there's some positives for sure, but there's certainly some negatives that we will need to look at. And we are jumping right into the records predictions. If you guys can already tell, this is cumulative. So every video that I do, it doesn't reset. This all counts. And yes, I can always correct things in the past. Like, we're already starting out with 0-2. But I do think that this is very crucial for us to be able to have integrity, is making sure that, what I say before also goes later. And it also gives you a reason why you should check out those videos, because sometimes I have some very unique opinions on why rosters can win versus not, like Antonio Pierce. But let's get right into this. Let's have a good time. Starting out with week 1, you're going up against the Seahawks. And, I'll call this out right now. This is not a game that you can't win, but you're going straight to Seattle's home. They're a run-heavy system. They have even more run-heavy offensive line. They have a really, really stacked defensive line comparatively, especially over the nose. I'm a little bit worried about, they're massively underrated defensive interior with Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, etc. Like, they have a really good defensive interior that can give your offensive interior a run for their money, and then they can also run the ball down your throat. I do think that the boundary corner situation with the Seahawks right now is a little bit up in the air. Reek Willen's awesome, but I'm forgetting who. I think it's Mike Jackson playing left cornerback for him. Like, not necessarily someone who I'm going to be putting as an elite corner. We also don't have elite wide receivers at the moment. So I will be giving this game to Seattle. I just think they are one of the more superior rosters. At the moment, Seattle is my 15th best roster, mainly because I have less faith in Geno now than I did last year. Week 2. This is a winnable game versus the Steelers. They're going to have a new system as well, new quarterbacks, but they're going to be extremely run heavy. They have one of the more underrated offensive lines, and they have a really, really good receiving core in terms of their number 1, but they do lack that number 2 wide receiver in the slot. Roman Wilson, I think, could be it's going to be a fun matchup between him and Chris Abrams-Drain or Jaquan McMillan. It's really going to be, Pickens versus Surtain. That's going to be a really fun chess match. I do think you might win the passing game. The question is, can you win the running game? And I don't trust that. Arthur Smith loves the run game too much. We have elite blockers there for the Steelers. It's just going to be way easier for the Steelers to win than you guys, unfortunately. The Steelers defense is far superior, and I really do think the Steelers are like the team to beat. You are in Mile High, so it's going to make it a little bit more difficult, but I do think the Steelers are one of those teams that you really do need to respect. Week 3, you end up going to Tampa. Tampa's a relatively like overrated roster, if I must say so myself. I think they're the next team I do in this. Oh no, there's one team before. But you are in Tampa, so they're going to be one of those teams that ends up having a much better record than how good I think they are. Because I do think that climate difference is just ridiculous. When you're going from Denver all the way to that nasty, muggy ass, like disgusting Tampa Bay weather, it does take a toll on you. And, I do think that they do outmatch in terms of talent to you guys. So it's going to be a rough start to the year. But at week 4, it's going to be a rough start. I'm just going to call it out right now. I'm looking at it right now. You guys are going to lose the first 6 games. I do think you could end up pulling in a W right here. Like, could call an upset. I could. Because, to be fair, the Buccaneers do have some inefficiencies, but their defensive interior is really good. I'm going to give it still to the Buccaneers. The Jets, they might have a hiccup, and they could be beaten, but I am going to give it to the Jets. Week 5, this is a game where I was actually debating it. I do think that you guys are still going to be so unpolished that it's going to be very difficult to win this game. But it is in Mile High. Like, this is, again, one of those games where I was debating it for the Raiders. But I love the Raiders' tenacity. Their defense is really solid. Their offense is just pretty lackluster, but they still have some good offensive moments. I think they do outmatch you right now at week number 5. It's just going to be a system with a lot more chemistry. And to me, I'm not seeing it for you guys with your defense. So we're going to leave it right there. At week number 6, I'm debating straight up just making this an average because I do think that Vegas would end up being a higher grade than you guys. Or no, they're actually equal grades. So I do feel pretty fine with that now. Regardless, at week number 6, Chargers coming off a fully rested bye week. Sucks for them to have a fully rested bye week, but it's going to be an 0-6 start. It is. But I do think you can end up upsetting New Orleans. I think that that's a really big game for Sean Payton, and I think you could win that. You're going to have a mini bye week, and you're going against Carolina, and you're in Denver. I see a little bit of a win streak happening right here. At week number 9, you're going against the Ravens. That's just a pain in the ass. You have a really tough schedule. The Ravens are going to be one of those regular season juggernauts, as always. Same thing with the Chiefs. You can't expect to beat the Chiefs at home. Like, it's just a pain in the ass. But in week 11, you are facing Kirk Cousins and the Falcons that I have as my number 17 team because of Kirk's injury. But they're a really, really good roster, man. They're a really good roster. It's going to be very difficult to beat them. But their edge rushing crew is still not fully up to par. I could see you guys actually pulling an upset here because you are in Mile High. Week number 13, Browns are coming off a mini bye. They are versing you at home, so I could see something happening there because your tackles are adequate enough for sure. I'm pretty much just factoring Myles Garrett effect in here, but I'm going to give it to the Browns. Again, they're going to be one of those teams I'm going to give a lot better records to. The AFC North, I have a ton of faith in. Maybe you guys end up getting a win here, a win there, back from the AFC when I end up doing their evals, but Cleveland themselves, I'm looking at it right now. They're my 21st graded team, but still, they're still, they're 20th actually. They're still a really, really good team. Week number 15, you're facing a fully rested Colts, but you two are fully rested. With Anthony Richardson's injury issues, and I also have Indy as, I believe, my 23rd best team. That's a bit of a small differential. I love Indianapolis, but you are playing at home. I am going to give you that win. Week 16, you are facing the Chargers at home. I think this is going to be a tough game for them, for you guys to play because the Chargers are going to be pushing for the playoffs. Same thing with the Bengals. They're competing with the Chargers and the Chiefs, as they do every year. So, especially coming off a mini bye, I'm going to give that to them. Looking at the Chiefs, I do think they'll be resting their starters in week 18. So I am actually going to be giving you guys a nice consolation prize. Very similarly to what I did. Where the hell are we at here? I'm tripping. It's very similar to what we did with the Raiders. The Raiders might be losing week 18 depending on whether I want to rest the Chiefs and Chargers starters in week 17/18 range. So keep that in mind. Again, that's very subject to change. Both those could end up being 4-12, but we're going to leave the video right there. I actually feel pretty damn solid about that. You ended up getting the majority of your wins at home, ended up sneaking a surprise victory there versus the Saints, but that is a Sean Payton thing to do. That's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. I love y'all. See you on the far side. Peace.